Yeah, hello everybody. So here it is, the Roto Control from Melbourne Instruments. And this is one of the devices I got basically requested to support it for Bitwig and Reaper every day now. And kindly enough, someone from the community donated me a device. So many thanks for that. So I can support you with that as well. So maybe you know Melbourne Instruments from their two hardware synthesizers they did, and they had these first with motor controlled knobs. So this has a big advantage that the knob is always in a correct position. More on that in a second. First, let's have a look what is in the package. So you get a little getting started manual, you get the device, you get a nice casing, which is helpful if you are on the go. And yeah, it will safely pack it away. And then you have the usual stuff like different power plug adapters, and you have a USB-C cable. And the good thing to report is that the device, especially with the price in mind, looks totally solid and feels solid. And the buttons, I absolutely like the buttons because they are like old IBM keyboards, so you can really push them hard. And also the knobs are nicely in place. Some people reported that they got models where one or two knobs are a bit wobbly. I cannot confirm that, so all my knobs are totally fine. The main discussion point on the internet is what is the benefit really of these knobs? You could instead simply have an endless encoder with an LED circle around it. And yeah, also LED circles are quite expensive and they're always limited to a number of different LEDs. So they are not that precise as such a knob. And something else to have in mind is really something I was also not aware of, that it feels like a real absolute knob, even if it's not. So what does that mean? It means that the motor stops the knob and it feels like a real knob, which you cannot turn more to the left as zero, and also not more to the right as a maximum position. But this can be controlled via software. So for example, if you have a stepped parameter, it feels like a stepped parameter. So for example, if there are three positions, it feels like there are three positions. It's impossible to describe. You have to test and feel that yourself. Enough of that. Let's have a look at Bitwig. And as I said, it's also supported for Reaper. At the end of the video, I will also have a quick look at how it works with Reaper, but it's pretty identical. So far, Melbourne Instruments only supports Ableton, and some of the things are really targeted via Ableton. So some of the naming is a bit Ableton specific, and also the colors which are supported on the display are only the colors of Ableton, but it's not that big of an issue. So also the Bitwig colors can be mapped quite nicely. And yeah, so how does this work now with Bitwig or also Reaper? You have basically three modes. So if you press here the mode button, it will show you these three modes. You also have a system configuration, which is not that interesting here, but you have three modes, which one is the mix mode. So you can control your mix, you can control the selected plugin, and then you have a MIDI mode, which means this MIDI mode can still be used in parallel with the DAW control. So if you have the need in Bitwig to map a very specific parameter or more than once in a project, you can do this via the MIDI mode, as long as you stay away from MIDI channel 16, because the device uses MIDI channel 16 for these other modes. But nevertheless, you can use the other 15 channels with all the CC parameters you want to use. Just to give you a quick impression, if we go here, I created here a test parameter. For example, you want to say, let's map whatever, let's say here the volume, then you say map controller or key, it's waiting, and you turn the knob, and then you control this specific parameter, which only works in that project. So you have to configure that for each and every project, but you could also put it in a template if you have such a regular need. And what is And you can not only configure the knobs, you also can configure the buttons. But let's have a look at the other two modes. So the mix mode is pretty straightforward. You have a few of the 8 tracks which are currently on this page, so it's also a paging idea, and then you can go with left and right keys to the other keys, and I implemented it in a way that you see all tracks, so you see your effect track and your master track as all normal tracks here. It works a bit different in Ableton. There you do not see the effect tracks, but that's not possible with Bitwig. I have either the choice to only show the normal, in air quotes, tracks or effect tracks or the master track, but I cannot combine the master with the normal track, so that's the thing. But nevertheless, there is a switch function which in Ableton shows only the effect track, so that does the same. So in that mode, you only also see the effect tracks. In this mode, you have also 3 modes for the buttons. So currently we are in this mute mode, which might be a bit strange for Bitwig users because in Ableton it's the other way around. It is not a mute one, it's an turn on off mode. So if it's enabled, it means the track is on, and if you press it, it means it's off. Might be a bit challenging to get used to it, but it's also straightforward, I think. How you program that controller is similar to how it works with, for example, the native instruments control keyboards, that you only fill in data and the rest is done by roto controls. So also don't send me any wishes for improvements. I cannot change anything about it. If you have wishes, you need to address them directly to Melbourne Instruments and they need to change their workflow or these modes. I can only fill in data and it looks how it looks. If you want to complain to them. So, okay, this was the first mode, the mute mode or on-off mode, how it's in Ableton. But there are more. So if you keep the select button pressed, and you have to keep it pressed to change functions, which is also strange because for the mode, you have to only press it once, and here you have to keep it pressed. So might also take a bit of time to get used to it. So, and you see here, we have here this on-off mode for the buttons, and you can switch to solo. So that's the second one. You can solo tracks and yeah, turn it off again. And same here for arming a track for recording. And you see there are already 2 armed, and I could also arm that one. Only the enabled tracks and that one. So this also works fine. And the knob on the top currently control the volume. So you can change here the volume of the track also as expected. And as again, I can show you really, you cannot go here below 0, which is really cool. And yeah, if you switch to the second one, they will automatically here adjust. And the same if we go back. Yeah, you can also have here the panning control. So now we change the panning here over track and you can access the sense. Yeah, this is not so nice. You have to press it multiple times if you have more than one sense. So you can go through the sense one by one. But now I selected here the first one, so we can change here this delay setting. But there's also a different view. I always call it the track view, where you have all parameters of a track. So this happens if you press here this function button, then you will see the volume, panorama, and the number of cents which are available on the track. And so you can control all parameters of the track at once. So change the panorama or change here the cents. And in all modes, you can change here to the transport, which is behind that button. And there you get this transport bar. So have the usual play function, stop, you can stop it again, and you can start the arranger recording as well. With that button, you can create a new clip. Here you can toggle the arranger loop. With that one, you can toggle punch in and punch out. And this one enables the arranger automation. I forgot to mention how to select a track. For that, you need to simply touch the knob and then it will select this track. So let's switch to the next mode, the plugin mode. And in that mode, you can access all the plugins on the track and edit their parameters, which is expected, but there's a twist to it which drove me insane to implement that. But because also this mapping process is a specific Ableton feature, and I had to work quite hard and be creative to make this work with Bitwig as well. So because normally in Bitwig you have these pages and you can directly show them on a device and everything's nice and easy, but they had the idea that you can map specific parameters from anywhere, and this is also stored in the device, which also created some issues for me. But nevertheless, it works pretty identical as it does with Ableton now. And as you see, I already mapped 2 parameters, which means I can control here in the polysynth the filter as well as the resonance. And you can map all of the parameters which are on the page. So I somehow needed to fix the problem, and you can go to any page you like. So let's say we want to go here to global and maybe map here the output. And this works like that. You press the learn button and then you select the knob you want to map. Could be any one. You can also toggle through the different pages. You can have up to 8 pages. Let's go back to the first one and let's say we want to map here the 4th knob, and you see it's getting blue now and says learning, and then you need to move that knob a bit and then it says learned output, and then you can stop learning and it will remember that each time that you access a polysynth. So let's check that. So it controls now the output automatically. You can also map the button, and what it currently does is it toggles between the minimum value and the maximum value. For example, let's go, I don't know, come on, and let's say the mix value here between the oscillator 1 and 2. Let's try with that. And again, you go to learn, and let's say we want to map here, whichever one, let's say the first button, it says also learning, and then you move that parameter and it says learned, and then you can deactivate it and you see we have here this parameter. And if we now press the button, it goes to minimum, and if I press it again, it goes to maximum. So you can use a button to toggle between 2 states. So what else is there in this mode? You can switch here quickly also to other tracks without switching the mode. So you could go here to another track. And if you keep the select button pressed, you can switch between different devices. So I have only here the polysynth, but let's add something else, like let's say a delay plus. And we are here on a delay plus, which I did not map anything. So that's a bit of a drawback. You have to map anything, even if you already made nice pages for it, you have to map it again. But nevertheless, it's also quick. Touch the knob, move something, for example, blur. And we have mapped blur, and then we can control that as well. And then you could switch here between the 2 devices and get the remembered parameters. If you do not keep that pressed and press it only once, you can use that to disable or enable the plugin. So I could disable now delay, or I could also disable here the polysynth and enable it again. Transport control is the same as we had it already in the main mix mode. And you can pin devices, so you see that here in the menu that something is pinned, so you could press that button to pin the device, and you see it got here this little pin activated, and you could unpin it again. Pin means if you switch to a different plugin in Bitwig, it will stay at this plugin, so you can keep controlling here the polysynth, for example. So, and that's already basically it, what you can do with the device. So, it's a bit limited, but I guess that's also intentional. And yeah, what are the pros and cons? So these knobs are definitely a pro, and this is the first. And I think, yeah, maybe we will see this in more devices in the future, and I would really like to see that. And I already mentioned in the introduction, it's a really nicely built and sturdy device. So starting with some drawbacks, or we need also to talk about what the device cannot do maybe yet, or I don't know if this will be implemented in the future. Starting with the hardware is that you have 2 USB-C connections, which means it needs quite a lot of power. If you connect it to a computer via a USB 3 port, it has enough power. But as I did here, to connect it to a USB 2 plug on my computer, you still need an additional power plug, which is coming with the device. But nevertheless, it's a little bit more hassle to set it up. So if you have only a USB 2 at your computer, don't forget that you also need the power. So we need to talk about what is not there. So there's currently no way to control scenes or clips, which could also be done. I think you could start 8 clips maybe or 8 scenes here with the buttons, but there is no such mode yet. And I guess something like this could be added. But as I said, I cannot do that. They need to do that. And yeah, that's a little bit sad. If they would have chosen an open approach that you could simply write to the displays and control all the buttons, then much more would be possible with this device. But now we have to wait what they are coming up with. In mix mode, there's no view meters, and I found especially problematic that you don't see which track is selected. You only see that if you go to the plugin mode, then it says the name of a track, but in the mix mode, you have no idea. So if you touch here the knob, you don't get any information if you only look at the device what is actually happening and if the select did work. And that's especially problematic because touch is a bit of a problem. I never had issues with touch on other devices, but maybe it's a bit of interference with the motor driver here, the motor drives. I don't know, maybe that's just a wild guess. They improved it a bit in the 112 firmware. So here you can configure the sensitivity of the touch. I set it to 7, but I noticed if I set it higher, it's doing really random stuff. So you don't have to come close to a knob, it's jumping around knobs. So 7 works better than the initial, I think 5 is the original setting. But nevertheless, you really need to touch the knob quite firmly to make it react. So it's not enough to get close. You see it, you really need to touch it to make it switch to that track in that case. In plugin mode, as I said, you have to map all the parameters. This is maybe more flexible, but also a little bit of unnecessary work if you don't want to change it. And if you are happy with what you have on the pages, or in Bitwig, you can already order your pages as they want. So it's a little bit of additional work to map that again in the device. And there's also currently no function to toggle a user interface of device. So for example, if you have a VST3 instrument or a clap instrument, which has its own user interface, there's no way to call up that interface from the device. You have to use your mouse in Bitwig. Then a little drawback is if you are here in the mix mode and want to select sends, you have no names of the send. So you only get send A, B, C, and so on, but you don't have a name what that send track is called. And then there's a quite unnecessary limitations. You can only see and control up to 64 tracks, so 8 pages, which is, yeah, you could have an endless selection. I don't know why it was necessary to limit it to 64. You might argue 64 is more than enough, but I've seen lots of projects which has more than 64 tracks. Yeah, and something that you might easily overlook is that you have the nice names of tracks and parameters, but you have no info about the current value besides what you see on the knob. So if you change a value, you see the knob position, but you don't get a readout of the value, which could also be easily added to the display. You might argue for the volume, it's not so necessary. Also for panorama or sense, it's fine, but I think it would be really helpful to have this in plug-in mode. Let's switch back to the polysyn, because if I change the filter frequency, it's not there. Maybe for stepped values, it would be helpful to get an idea what the value readout is. Yeah, talking about stepped values, in the latest Bitwig update, it's now possible to get this info for the native devices, but no text for it. You only get the infos. There are 3 steps, but you don't get any names for the 3 steps. Nevertheless, it's something I want to look into for a future update. Then the choice to have the knobs above the display is something that can be discussed. I think it might have made more sense to have the knobs below and the buttons above, because if I change it, my hand covers the rest of the parameters if I want to read what's here on a display. And the buttons are only pressed once, so this might be more helpful if they would have put it above and the knobs below, but I guess that's up to taste. Then you might wonder what is an alternative for this product, and the Electra One controller comes here to mind, and it has more knobs and it has a touch display. And I think the benefits of it is it does not have the limitations I explained now. Yeah, it does not have motorized knobs, but if you change here a knob, you see the value and the position directly in the display. And yeah, also your hand does not cover the display. But as I said, it's up to taste. And yeah, what is nice here is the form factor. So you can easily put it, for example, also on a keyboard, or it does not take up too much space on your desk. So with that, you have it basically in a more square form, which might be harder to put anything. But yeah, it's up to taste. So let's also have a little look at Reaper. And with Reaper, it works absolutely identical. Let's go here to the mix mode. You see also here the tracks. You can do the muting, and you can switch here to solo and you can do soloing, and the same for arming your track for recording. This does also work. The plug-in mapping works a little bit different here. So with that, for example, if I want to map here the synth 1, you also need to make sure that it's enabled, and you need to show the plugin. And you see I mapped already one parameter here, and it works the same. You need to go to learn and need to touch the knob you want to learn, and then you can simply fiddle here on one parameter, and then it's mapped and ready to be used. And also transport is here, and this is also working as expected. So here it is now, the support for Bitwig and Reaper. And yeah, I'm curious, what do you think? How do you like the device? Is it good? Is it bad? What do you think about it? Write me down in the comments. And yeah, until next time, make some funky music.